Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sooners Xtra Podcast. I'm Colton Sulley alongside Ryan Aber. We cover OU for the Oklahoman, and we've been planning on doing a podcast for some time now. And we thought, what better time to get this ramped up than for some postseason softball? Ryan, how's it going, man?
Yeah, not bad. Just glad to be back at the podcasting game and glad to have you on board for sure. And yeah, we'll make this a much more regular occurrence now that we're getting started.
For sure. And we could just jump right into some softball. Obviously, the regular season's in the books for the Sooners, and it was quite an eventful one. From Love's Field opening to uh, for the first time, we're seeing some uncharacteristic struggles, but it's postseason time finally. OU finished second in the Big 12 to Texas and barely finished as high as that. And we are recording this on a Wednesday ahead of OU's first game in the Big 12 tournament, where they'll face either Houston or Kansas in this new bracket format, as the league has more teams now. Ryan, what are you kind of looking at for ahead of this tournament for OU?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just building on that momentum that they got a little bit on Sunday, and talking to Patty Gazzo not only yesterday at her press conference that we'll touch on a little bit more, but Monday at the unveiling of Devon Park. She feels like that could be a big time turning point for her team, and felt her team sort of regain some of that swagger, that confidence that they've had and done such a good job with in past years. It's sort of been missing over the last couple months, and we'll see if they're able to build on that. But their pitching has got to keep the ball in the park. That's been an issue for them. Harley Keeney was fantastic last weekend, but really the rest of their pitchers struggled in spots. And they if they can do that, if they can keep the ball in the park, give their offense a chance, and I think be a little bit more aggressive at the plate, which they showed a little bit more on Sunday than they had in the first couple of games of that series. This is still a team that's got a chance to win a championship. I think it's important to know that how strong the Big 12 is at the top this year. You look at the rankings with Texas number 1, what is it? Oklahoma State number 3, I believe, OU number 4, 3 of the top 4 teams in this league. So no shame in finishing second, but there are things that they've got to get cleaned up and get cleaned up quickly if they want to, keep that WCWS run going.
Yeah, definitely. And just looking at the bracket here, we might get a Bedlam rematch on Friday, obviously with
I think
uh,
I'd be stunned if it didn't happen at this point. Now, BYU can be dangerous, so I'm not gonna completely write off that, BYU could jump up and beat OSU, although I think, in that kind of environment with, with what Oklahoma State can roll out there pitching-wise with Rosenberry and Kilfoyle, I'd sort of be surprised if, we had anything other than a Bedlam semifinal.
right. And I think you touched on it, but I'm looking at the bracket right now, and the only team I could see upsetting a OSU or an OU or a Texas in this thing is probably BYU. Beat OU obviously a couple weeks ago, and uh, I think, like you said, Carly Keeney obviously had a big weekend, but we're gonna have to see some majors pitchers step up here in the next couple of days, Ryan. But you talked to Patty Gasso yesterday during her media availability. What were kind of some takeaways from that as she previews the tournament?
Yeah, I think a couple things stand out. First of all, Carly Keeney, like you mentioned, she was fantastic. And that seems to be something that they could sort of grab hold of and use much more of. Her usage was way down during a Big 12 play, but talked to Carly yesterday as well, and she said that that finger that she broke during the fall continued to be an issue for much of the season, and it's finally she feels 100% both physically and mentally, and just using sort of that let her rip mentality that really paid dividends for her against Oklahoma State. It wasn't just that Sunday appearance, which was phenomenal, but those first 2 games as well. She kept helped keep them in those games. And if they can get something out of her in the postseason, I think that can go a long way toward helping stabilize things. But the biggest thing for them is at the top end of that pitching staff. They've got to get Kelly Maxwell going again. Now, last weekend, a little bit different for Kelly Maxwell, just emotionally facing her former team, but they have to get her right again. And then Kirsten Deal, who had been so fantastic over the last few weeks and really struggled against Bedlam in Bedlam. They really need to get her going again. And like I said, the biggest thing, just keep the ball in the park. If they're able to give themselves a chance, then generally their defense is going to be good enough. They're going to, find ways to get outs. Otherwise, it's when the home runs start coming, especially when they get a walk followed by a home run. That's when things really go south for them. And then on the other side, first of all, offensively, Ella Parker has been really good. I'd look for her near the top of the order this weekend. I think she's sort of solidified her place up there. And Patty Gasso really likes what she's done out of the leadoff spot when she's used her there. So it'll be interesting to see what Patty Gasso does lineup wise. But I think the biggest thing for that offense is one, getting Tiara Jennings going. She has really struggled. This is one of the best hitters all time in college softball, and she has really struggled over the last 4 weeks. I think what was it, 4 of the last 29 for her was hitless in Bedlam, except for the home run until the home run she hit on Sunday. And when Tiara Jennings is going, that just trickles down the entire lineup, and they've got to get her right in order to not only make a run this weekend. I think they can do it maybe without her this weekend, but if they're going to make a deep run in the WCWS, then Tiara Jennings has to be right at the center of that.
Yeah, for sure, Ryan. I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned there. Obviously, you mentioned Kelly Maxwell's struggles, but very tough weekend for her, obviously facing her former team. And Patty Gasso said as much on Sunday that Kelly just wanted to get through the weekend, let alone, pitch well. So she's obviously been open about her mental health struggles, and we've seen, Kenny Jaeski's comments in the past. So you think that we're going to see a different Kelly now that this series is behind her, and what do you kind of expect leading up to the postseason?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that it'll be back to Kelly Maxwell being Kelly Maxwell. I mean, you know, she struggled against Oklahoma State. A couple things. One, those were largely hitters that weren't familiar with her, but just the emotional sort of baggage of playing your former team, I think, can weigh on you a little bit. But you look at their other big series of the year, Kelly Maxwell was really good in. She was really good against Texas, despite that loss there. And I think that maybe she's not as much a concern as, to me, Kirsten Deal, who's never been in this situation, who wasn't as much of a rotational pitcher last year as she is this year, and then Nicole May, who you wonder, is she able to take what she got out of those first 5 innings the other day, because they were fantastic. Nicole May was as good as she's been, I think, all season over those first 5 innings of Bedlam on Saturday. But then things went south for her in the sixth, and was it in the fifth? And that worm sort of turned a little bit. If Nicole May can get back to being what she was early in that game, I think OU's got a real chance to show off some of that pitching depth that we've talked about all year, but has disappeared at times.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing that puzzles me about Kirsten Deal is she's been so dominant as a starter. I think an ERA under 1, but when she comes out of the bullpen, the struggles kind of start to reappear. I think her ERA out of the bullpen is, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's over 10 or something wild like
Yeah,
that. So just
it's not good for
no.
sure. And I think it's a really hard position to be in, because when you are starting the game, you've got so much time to prep, to plan. And not that the non-starters don't go through a lot of that process, but just mentally you have to ramp yourself up really quickly in that situation versus starting. And I think that can take a toll on certain players, especially certain young players. I think, really you look at it across the board, and Kirsten Deal's been the one who's dealt with it the most. But really all of them. I mean, you look at Kelly Maxwell coming out of the pen when she did over the weekend, and had some of those same sort of struggles. We've seen it with Nicole May as well. Really, the one pitcher who you can look at and say things are consistent from starting to coming out of the pen is Carly Keeney, which I think can pay dividends for them. But also, Patty Gasso said that she hoped that Carly Keeney's mentality could sort of bleed off into the rest of that staff, and not just in that starters versus relievers mentality, but also just the way that she attacked things. And if they can do that, they've certainly got the talent, especially in Kelly Maxwell, who I anticipate will be by far the most used pitcher over the postseason. But in Kirsten Deal and Nicole May as well, that they can start to maybe find some things that have been missing for them over these last few weeks.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how Patty uses them. I'm glad you mentioned Ella Parker. I covered the game on Sunday, and what was, a senior celebration day. The seniors weren't really the contributors. It was more the freshmen like Ella Parker, who went 3 for 4 with a home run. You saw Cassidy Pickering also hit the home run, I believe. Uh,
Yeah.
OU's freshmen, I think, are going to be very key in the postseason as well. When pitchers try and key on Tiare Jennings, Kinsey Hansen, those big time hitters that we know. I want to move on to some news today. The Big 12 awards were released. Kinsey Hansen, Defensive Player of the Year. Ryan, to me, over the years, Kinsey Hansen's probably been OU's most clutch player in these postseason moments. She obviously hasn't had the average or the home run numbers that players like Allo or Tiare Jennings have had, but just the clutchness of Kinsey Hansen and just the steadiness behind the plate. How big is it that OU has her back this year for another postseason run, and how impressive was she defensively this season?
Yeah, just really, really good. Not only with the actual work she did behind the plate, but keeping runners in check, things like that. I mean, she to me is the emotional center of this team, and the sort of chip on her shoulder mentality that she plays with at all times has sort of fueled this team, and I think is helped them fight through some things. But the way that Kinsey Hansen has come back since that injury that she went through early in the season, I think is just really been phenomenal. I think I started to wonder, how well she would be able to respond to that given all the knee injuries that she has been through. Riley Ludlam played, pretty well in her absence. So you wondered, if that lingers, does Ludlam wind up becoming the primary catcher? But Kinsey Hansen at the plate has been phenomenal. I mean, she's leading them in batting average at 415, and just comes up with clutch hit after clutch hit. I think to me the defining moment for her Sooners career is the home run against Clemson that wasn't a game winner. You sort of think of it as a game winner because of the moment that it was, but it was a game saver for sure, and just sort of put the cap on the Marita Hines Field experience. And I think Kinsey Hansen is one of those that's going to go down as one of the greatest OU players to ever play, and not just because of the production, not just because of those clutch moments, but just the way that she carries this team. And I think it sort of goes to that, what Grace Lyons was able to do the last few years is what Kinsey Hansen has been able to do this year on this team, even though their styles are much different.
Yeah, no, that's a great comparison. Just the personalities that they are on the team. Kinsey compared with Grace Lyons, phenomenal behind the plate. Committed just 3 errors over 214 innings. Had 0 errors during conference play. Only allowed 14 wild pitches. So just really remarkable defensively for Kinsey. Other Big 12 awards released today. OU had 9, led the conference again. Jada Coleman, Tiare Jennings, Alyssa Brito, Kelly Maxwell, Kinsey Hansen on the first team, Riley Boone, Alina Torres, Kirsten Deal, and Ella Parker on the second team. Um, Obviously, Parker made the freshman team as well, as along with Cassidy Pickering. Ryan, I know we've talked about Bedlam a little bit here to start, but OU fans kind of on social media, especially, the world was kind of ending after those two losses to start. I mean, some fans were calling for the team to move back to Marita Hines. We've seen some struggles at Love's
I,
Field
I
here to
think I
start.
saw somebody call for JT Gasso's firing.
Oh yeah, JT Gasso has been all over the message boards all season long. What It's kind of a tough question to ask because OU's won three straight national titles, and they finished second. They're the fourth best team in the country. Where do they stand? And it kind of seems inevitable at this point, despite the struggles, that OU is going to be back in the World Series, and I wouldn't be surprised if they won it all again.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think OU fans for one have been very spoiled over the last couple of years because it's easy to forget how hard this game is and how unforgiving it can be with the success that they've had because it hasn't. You look at their number of losses, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that only Boston has lost fewer games in the country this year right now than the Sooners. And obviously, Boston's not playing the schedule that OU is playing. So it's been a really, really good season. And I think people sometimes sort of take for granted the level of success and the level of success or the level of, uh, you know, just excellence that this team has had over the last few years. That said, there are things that they've got to get cleaned up. I mean, we've talked about all of them. The batting and able to string good at bats together, not leave so many runners on base, to be a little bit more aggressive at the plate, the pitching, keeping the ball in the park, things like that. So I think it's far from a certainty that this team wins another one, but it's not going to be surprising at all if they get on a run and do it because they've got the talent. There's no doubt about that. They have the best senior class in college softball history with Tiara Jennings, Jada Coleman, Alyssa Brito, Nicole May, that core that's been together for so long, Kenzie Hansen. Um, but they've got to go out and prove it, and I think that starts this weekend. But if they're able to right the ship this weekend, especially if they're able to win this thing, then all of a sudden I think you're talking about them as the favorites going in. But it's not going to be easy. It's the last couple of years you could say, well, they're OU's the prohibitive favorites, and it's going to be a surprise if they get knocked off. Not going to be the case this year, but they're certainly one of the few teams that I would say has a chance to walk off of Devon Park, walk out of Devon Park here in a month or so with the national championship.
Yeah, for sure. It's just been a roller coaster season, from losing to Louisiana, the BYU losses, the Texas trip. This team's definitely not as perfect as teams in the past. I mean, it's like you said, OU fans have been spoiled, but Patty's been pretty open the last couple of weeks just about, what this group of seniors is dealing with. Obviously, the anxiety of what's next after softball is a common theme. Playing in a new ballpark that you're not used to. I mean, Patty says that I think after every game still. It's just like they're trying to still figure out where they're at on their new field, just the massive stage that they're playing on. So I think the team definitely, rightfully so, has felt kind of the pressure throughout this thing, and what they're projected to do every single season is getting kind of unrealistic at this point. But still the best team in the country, like we said, and we both wouldn't be surprised if they won it all again. I was curious. I think we talked about this in our meeting earlier this week, but it feels like to me, while OU's fourth and finished second in the Big 12, if there were softball betting lines, I still think OU would probably be favored to win it all again, or second. So
Yeah,
just
I would, if you give me a choice of OU or the field,
Yeah.
I think I'd take OU right now, and it's uh, not only because of their history and the fact that they're experienced, they've been here, but also you just look at the path and where this thing is played. I mean, there's no denying that there's a home field advantage for OU when they play in Oklahoma City at the WCWS. And the other thing is there's no team in the country that has been in that kind of environment like OU. I mean, heck, you probably would say really the only ones among the top tier teams are Oklahoma State and a little bit of Texas, although Texas that was a home series down in Austin for them this year, and they haven't played it at Hall of Fame. So it's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. Patty Gasso has talked repeatedly about how Love's Field is almost a louder environment than well, I keep wanting to say Hall of Fame Stadium, the Devon Park, whatever
Devin
we're calling
Park.
it. It's going to be good to be able to refer to it as that just for brevity's sake, but
Yeah,
it's still a little unusual. But that stadium is so different from anything in college softball outside of Love's Field that I think that that's an advantage that can't be overlooked at all. And it's not just about having 60-70% OU fans. It's about playing in that kind of environment, that kind of stage that really only OU does on a regular basis.
for sure, Ryan. Well, just real quick before we dive into some non-softball matters, you can follow our coverage on the Oklahoman.com. Ryan and I will be potting, like we said, throughout the postseason, but also you can read our work on at the Oklahoman. Let's get into some football. Obviously, football rules OU at all times, even during the offseason, and recruiting is a big thing, especially ahead of the SEC. And OU's landed some big ones recently, including Dominic Williams out of the portal. Seemed like LSU, Texas, Missouri there for a little bit, and OU were kind of the four gunning for one of the top defensive linemen in the portal. Ryan, how's it kind of feels similar to the David Stone commitment out of high school. It's just OU and Todd Bates and Brent Venables are starting to land some big time defensive linemen. And how crucial was a get like this, not only for the SEC, but I think it showed that OU can compete with some of these bigger schools in the NIL game.
Yeah, I think that to me is the biggest piece of this whole thing that there were, and we talk about the OU softball fans freaking out about some of the issues that they had, especially last weekend. OU football fans have been freaking out about the NIL landscape and where OU stood in that. And I think to go out and get a guy like Dominic Williams, who, like you said, was pursued by not only some of the best programs in the country, but some of the ones who have been at the forefront of the NIL landscape. I think that can quiet some fears for OU fans. Now they've got to again uh, using some of the same philosophy that we talked about with softball. They have to show that that can be a consistent thing and not just a one-off thing. But a very encouraging sign for them off the field and then on the field. I think this could be a game changer for them, just as far as not only what Dominic Williams can bring at the front line, but the depth that that adds because you go down the line and you've got some guys that they feel really good about, not only in the short term but at the long term. And adding a guy like Williams, I think, gives them the ability to rotate in a way that they really haven't been able to do for quite a while. And in the SEC, that's going to be critical. I've mentioned it. If I mentioned it once, I mentioned it 100 times and more. That to me, the biggest upgrade that needed to to happen on this team on the field was on the defensive line, and I think they've really taken some very significant strides over the last year, especially to do that. And we'll see how that translates, at least in the first year in the SEC.
Ryan, spring football's over. Portal window has closed, although they could still get some commitments rolling in. But it seems like OU is at the OU's roster for the 2024 season is kind of solidifying itself. Where in your mind, and I'll jump in here as well with some thoughts, but looking at the SEC as a whole, where does OU stand right now post spring and post spring portal window compared to other SEC? Like where would you rank OU at this point?
Yeah, it's sort of hard to say. I would put them probably behind the absolute top echelon of things, with what Georgia has done and some of the others, although Alabama, I sort of wonder how that's going to translate now with Kalen DeBoer, although I really like that hire and think he'll ultimately be very successful there. But I think that they've closed the gap in a lot of ways, especially on that defensive line. The secondary, I think, has been improved, but they've got to. Jackson Arnold has got to be able to show that he can make good decisions and be consistent in that regard. I still have some questions about that offensive line, even though they bolstered it a little bit with the addition of the SMU guy at center, whose name completely just left my mind. But
Hickman, right?
Yeah, Hickman, that's
Hickman.
right. So they I still wonder about that group and how that comes together, especially when you're facing all those defensive linemen that we just talked about in the SEC. But I think with what they've done on the defensive side, I think OU fans have got to feel pretty good about their chances to. I'm not. I don't think they're going to compete to win an SEC title this year right off the bat, but I think they've got a chance to be very, very competitive and take some steps in the right direction before they break through over the next couple of years. What about you? What do you think about how things stand for them entering the first year in the SEC?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you have your group of top echelon programs right now, whether that's Georgia, I would put Georgia and Texas probably at the
Yeah,
top right now. And then I think there's that kind of middle group, and I think OU might be at the bottom of that little middle group. I think Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU, even maybe a Missouri who has just stockpiled talent and won 10 games last year in the
Missouri to
league.
me is going to be maybe the most fascinating team
Yeah.
in the SEC this year, just because of what you mentioned and what they've been able to do. And then, obviously, adding Caden Green as
Yeah.
part of that will be interesting to see how that plays out.
I think the OU Missouri rivalry renewed with all that transpired with Caden Green, some of the other transfer portal and high school recruits that Missouri beat OU out on. OU obviously traveling to Columbia is going to be a fun one in this upcoming season. But yeah, I would put OU in that middle group with a Missouri, with an LSU, with an Ole Miss, and even an Alabama with a new head coach. I think Georgia and Texas are the clear favorites, but um, I think 9 wins isn't too far off. I think probably closer to 8 for OU this season, but you never know. And like you said, the defense is strong. A lot of returners: Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, Peyton Bowen, Woody Washington, as well as some new additions like a David Stone and a Dominic Williams. I think it's going to be really interesting. Um, Ryan, let's just briefly touch on some other OU sports before we go. OU baseball's in first place. I saw
Yeah,
all
it's
over Twitter when softball was losing this weekend that OU's now a baseball school, and a lot of people turning their attention to baseball. But Skip Johnson's group's rolling, 3 games ahead of both OSU and in West Virginia, I believe, for first
yeah.
place. Um, I know you've primarily been focused on softball, but from afar, just what are your thoughts on the way they're playing?
I mean, first of all, uh, Skip Johnson. I mean, I don't think it can be overstated the job that he's done with this group, and not a whole lot of people expected a ton out of them this year. I think there was a lot of thought about potential, but it was more about building and building back after that really tough 2020 season when things sort of looked like they were coming together for them, and they just haven't. Uh, Outside of it, obviously made that College World Series run, but you wondered. how they would handle that last season in the Big 12, and they've been able to do it phenomenally. Hasn't been perfect. They've had some midweek struggles, some non-conference struggles, but the way that that pitching staff has come together, especially at the front end, the last couple weekends,
Braden
has
Davis has been
yeah,
phenomenal.
Braden Davis has been absolutely fantastic for them, and I think you think about what kind of odds you could have gotten that OU baseball would finish higher than OU softball in the Big 12 rankings, and obviously they got to take care of business the last couple weeks against Baylor and a Cincinnati team
Cincinnati, yeah.
be a little bit dangerous, but just a fantastic job for them and a fantastic place to be. Going to be really interesting to me if they're able to break into one of those top 16 spots and get a regional host spot because I
Yeah.
think that would be a major thing for this program. What about you? What stands out to you about the job that Skip Johnson has done and this baseball program has done getting to where they are?
Yeah, especially the last couple of years. Like you said, I got to cover the World Series run to Omaha, and just that team was special. And I think while last year's team didn't quite reach those goals, I think the momentum from that team is obvious, and some of the recruits that Skip's getting. And then obviously, like you mentioned, hosting a regional this season would be huge for the program heading into the SEC next year, where the competition level just raises. It seems like every Big 12 series, Skip has this team dialed in, maybe outside of OSU, who just has their number every single year. Um, but I think, like you said, if they finish strong with these last two series, they should be on pace to host a regional. And we all know from the 2022 run, once you make it in the field, anything can happen. Especially when you have some of the weapons OU does on its roster. Ryan, we're running out of time here, but real quickly, wanted to just we'll track this as the weeks go by. But OU men's basketball went from having not having a roster a couple of weeks ago to looking like they've added some decent pieces here. Just gonna go down the list: DePaul's Kobe Elvis, Fairfield's Bryson Gooding, High Point's Duke Miles, and the most interesting one to me, Long Beach State's Jadon Jones. A real elite shooter. I had the chance to talk to his coach at Long Beach State, which is Don Munson, who remember was fired, and then they ended up making the tournament, and they kept him on for a bit there before letting him go. But it seems to me like obviously you don't want to lose the amount of guys Porter lost, and I think the Caden Cooper one really hurts, and that's one that's was pretty alarming for fans. But it seems like to me a couple of these pieces, a Duke Miles, a Jadon Jones, might turn out to be an upgrade over a guy maybe like a Javion McCollum. But I think what's most troubling for OU fans is like I said, losing Caden Cooper, but also I would not be surprised at all if a Milo Suzan or an Otega Owe went to Kentucky and Houston and just went off next year and led them to tournaments.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Otega Owe is able to do at Kentucky. I think he's got a chance to, if he can find some consistency. That's the biggest thing for him that I think he's got a chance to thrive there. And then obviously Uzan with down there in Houston going to be interesting. But another one of those guys that I find fascinating is Goodine from Fairfield and
Right.
his ability to shoot. He's primarily been a bench player, so I would anticipate that's probably the role that he would face under Porter Moser's team. But I think if you can get a guy like that that can give you some depth, come off the bench and shoot well, you add it to Jaden Jones, like you mentioned. I think that they've got a chance to be maybe even a little bit better on the perimeter. And let's remember they're taking a little bit of a step back as far as the competition level
Yep.
in Big 12 play. Yes, there are some beasts at the top of the SEC with what Alabama has become under Nate Oates. Kentucky, even with their transition, is still going to be tough to deal with. But you don't have the just the constant grind that
Right.
it is in the Big 12. I mean, heck, I sort of compare the Big 12 basketball to SEC football, and just
Right.
the grind of it from game to game can just wear you down. And I think we saw that with OU this year. I think that that's going to be a big thing, but they have got to make a tournament run this year. I don't think if Porter Moser misses the tournament for a fourth straight year, that you can keep pushing forward with him. They've got to find a way to develop some consistency, hold on to players, and not have to do this total rebuild every year. I know it's difficult with the landscape, and you talk about NIL, and I think NIL and basketball is tough for the Sooners in that regard. It's just really hard for them to compete nationally in that landscape, and that's something that they've got to figure out a way to work through. What about you? What do you feel like needs to happen with this basketball program over this off season and next season?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about NIL. It's obviously the basketball team at OU probably doesn't have quite the NIL funds that the football or softball team has, but I still think, like I said, Porter was able to make a few additions. I think they have 2 scholarship spots still open. Obviously, have Dayton Forsyth coming in out of high school. You mentioned the SEC is not quite as tough as the Big 12, so I still think that they could have a decent season here. I think Porter's still a good coach, but time's running up, as you said, for him to make the tournament, and this might be his last shot. At
Yeah, I
OU,
don't think there's any doubt about it.
yeah. And given the frustration at the end of last season, I mean, they were in the tournament every single day
Yeah.
throughout the season until Selection Sunday. So we'll see how that plays into it, Ryan. But I think that'll wrap us up here on Sooners Extra. Appreciate you hopping on, and we'll see you guys probably Sunday after Selection Sunday.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Colton.
Yep, awesome. Talk to you then.